Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast today, the day before Thanksgiving Day, one of my favorite days of the year. I'm really excited because time with family, right? Home cooked food, delicious food, opportunity to give thanks for all the things that we've been blessed with. So, you got big plans tomorrow, brother?
I don't know. We have Governor DeWine's been crashing down on us pretty hard. So I don't know if I want to go live with this, but we are going to have Thanksgiving dinner. So just, maybe DeWine won't crash our party because we'll have more than 5 people or whatever it is on it.
Oh, man, it's craziness, man. I tell you. I mean, so originally our plan was going to be to go back to Idaho for Thanksgiving with our family there. But since we were just there for a funeral of a family member, it didn't make sense to, turn around and go back and, 2 weeks later when it's 600 miles away. So it's just me, my wife, my 5 kids tomorrow.
Nice.
But I married an amazing cook. So it's going to be awesome.
Beautiful.
Meanwhile, in Colorado here, they're cracking down pretty good on us as well, saying you shouldn't be traveling anywhere and you should just stay home. And it's crazy. So meanwhile, the mayor of Denver, I just saw this reported this morning. The mayor was just on the local news yesterday or the day before, really pushing, hey, stay home for Thanksgiving. Don't have big gatherings. Just stay home. And it just leaked out this morning that the mayor just flew to Mississippi to be with his daughter for Thanksgiving there.
Shocking.
Which, by the way, I don't blame him for one bit. It's his daughter. It sounds like it's still a relatively small gathering or whatever. Okay, whatever. I don't care. But it's just funny and somewhat hypocritical.
A little bit.
Conversely, here's the thing, especially in a place like Denver, right? If the mayor didn't come out and say, COVID-19, we must be careful, folks, stay home, then he would have caught crap from Denverites for not saying something about it. Right. So it's clearly his intent was to be with his daughter and his wife for Thanksgiving in Mississippi. And I don't think we should blame the man for that, right? I really think it's a difficult spot to be in when you're a mayor in a less than I hate using terms like liberal and conservative, but you guys know what I mean, right? Anyway, so let's move on. Yeah, I see Dale here posting Illinois limiting to 8 people per house and no more than 2 families. I mean, this is it's insanity. It's insanity.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Well, brother, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving and that also everyone is safe and healthy and that
Absolutely.
You avoid the COVID-19.
Absolutely. You guys, you too, and everybody who's listening, I'm sure we'll hit it up again, but be safe and everything like that.
Looking forward to our episode today, folks. We're going to break down the Shooter Ready Challenge, which features the El Presidente Drill. We're going to talk about turns and draws and movements, draws with movement and stuff like that. It'll be a fun episode here today. So, also I have a special surprise for today's episode. Something that hasn't made an appearance on this show before. And it's been a while since something of a similar nature made an appearance on the show. There's a hint. All right. Here we go. Let's do it in 3, 2, 1. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode number 460. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host, Riley Bowman. And I'm joined today by Matthew Marister.
Greetings, sir.
What is up, brother?
Happy to be here alive with you and ready to go for Thanksgiving.
Absolutely, man. Here we are on this Thanksgiving Eve. Looking forward to a great holiday tomorrow with my family and my loved ones here. I know you're doing the same. Mm-hmm. And so we wish everyone from us here at the Concealed Carry Podcast, a happy Thanksgiving. And we hope that it is memorable and joyful and also safe for all of you out there, because some of you will be defying governor's orders and such and probably traveling to be with loved ones. And not only do I think that's okay, I would almost say I encourage it. In fact, I would say I encourage it. It depends. I guess it depends on where you are. It depends on the level of enforcement that comes with such orders. In other words, I don't advocate for breaking the law, but sometimes some of this stuff is pretty silly. Mm-hmm. However, I recognize that COVID-19 is a serious thing for some folks. It's impacted my family directly, including some on a very personal level. At the same time, this is still America, right? Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, we wish you a happy Thanksgiving. This is our first episode, of course, today. We have another one coming up here in 3 hours, 4 p.m. Mountain Time. We'll do episode 461 of, I believe it'll be Jacob and me. And look forward to that as well. So, well, let's get into today's episode, where we're breaking down the Shooter Ready Challenge this month, which features the El Presidente drill. Classic drill, and a big, like a kind of a core component of that drill, if you will, is the turn and draw that it starts with, right? Because a classic El Presidente, you start with your back to the target. And so you have to turn around, find your target, draw, and shoot your targets. And we'll break that down some further here in a bit. But that's going to be kind of the focus of our episode today. We're going to break down the El Presidente. I'm going to give you some tips on how to succeed at El Presidente. And then we're going to transition into talking about just the general idea of the draw of our gun having different movement incorporated, whether it is a turn and draw. It could be a 90-degree turn. It could be a 180-degree turn. It could be a 45-degree turn. I don't really care. The idea of a turn and draw, but also drawing and moving with the gun as well. Something that I have a little bit of experience with, especially since we do that a lot in USPSA competitive shooting. Today's episode is sponsored by, and they are also sponsors of the Shooter Ready Challenge, which is found at shooterreadychallenge.com. We have LASRX, the virtual training software for dry fire training, software I've been using now for some time, and the Laser X version is the best thing that they've come out with yet, because it works with any electronic device that is internet connected. So whether I've used it on my iPhone, I've used it on my iPad, I've used it on my laptop, and my other computers. Between Jacob and me, we've tested it on Kindle Fire tablets, on Android phones of various types, Windows-based computers, Mac computers. It all works because LaserX runs right within your internet browser, which is awesome, because the classic version of LASR, or Laser Activated Shot Reporter, was only compatible with Windows operating systems. Right. So I actually bought I hadn't used a Windows-based machine in a few years, and I bought a laptop, an inexpensive one, just so I could run the Laser software. But LaserX fixes all of that. Here's the thing. I use a lot of different tools for dry fire practice, and I'm going to feature another one of those tools in a second here for our other sponsor spot. The thing that, while I may not use LaserX for everything, where it excels is it's one of the only things, it may be the only thing I have found and found to work reliably, that allows me to actually do shot timer stuff, like get actual recorded shot times in a virtual or dry fire training environment, right? And that is the power and the value of something like LaserX software. Learn more at laserapp.com today. And today's other episode sponsor is Next Level Training's SIRT pistol. I have the still relatively new P320 model here, holding it up in front of the camera for those that are viewing with us today. And this is great, because you guys know I run a 320 platform most of the time these days. So finally having a P320 version of the SIRT pistol much appreciated. I've used also SIRT pistols for a long time as training tools. I use them in classes for demonstrations. We can use SIRT pistols for demonstrations where we want to be safe. We want to maybe demonstrate something where a gun is pointed more in the direction of a student. And, maybe because sometimes there's things we can learn from being able to view things like grip or how I'm positioning things as I'm holding or presenting a gun to the target. You can see some of that stuff from a front angle that maybe you can't see from over the shoulder or from the side. So I use SIRT pistols in that context all the time. And we've even used them in some kind of like very simple force-on-force type scenarios. You want to be careful with that because we don't want to shine lasers in people's eyes and stuff like that. But for some real simple basic demonstrations, I've used SIRT pistols in that context as well. And it works great because it is a inert training device, cannot hurt you unless you stare at the laser in your eye for long. So don't do that. Don't do that. I would not recommend it. Particularly this particular model. This is the P320 full size, and it has the green laser in it. So it is the green laser is really, really bright. Anyway, I use the SIRT pistol in this month's Shooter Ready Challenge video that is up and posted to shooterreadychallenge.com. Guys, if you want to learn more about SIRT pistols, maybe perhaps consider picking up your own, head on over to nextleveltraining.com today. So, and before I get too far along here, Matthew, I got to introduce a special guest.
Okay.
And it is Manhattan Special, naturally flavored soda, sarsaparilla.
I figured when you said that, I was trying to think about what you were going to bring back out, and that's where my mind went. Thankfully,
of course. So Jacob and I were in Oklahoma City last week, Thursday, Friday, and had some business down there. Actually did some things with CCW Safe, a sponsor of the podcast, and our buddy Brian Eastridge, host of the On Duty Off Duty podcast, which if you haven't checked that out, head on over to ondutyoffdutypodcast.com, or maybe it's ondutyoffduty.com. I think it is ondutyoffduty.com. Anyway, Brian was kind of our tour guide there for part of our excursions in Oklahoma City, and he took us to this place called Pops 66, I think. It's a little, it's like a convenience store, a little gas station in Arcadia, Oklahoma, which is pretty close to Oklahoma City. And they have like every variety of root beer and cream soda and sarsaparilla and all kinds of stuff, dude. It was really cool. So I picked up this bottle of Manhattan Special sarsaparilla, and Brian said he had one and he said it was good. So we're gonna open this up on air right now. You hear that? Psst.
Sounds good.
Here we go. All right, first sip. Ooh, yeah. Yep, that is a winner. All right, Manhattan Special sarsaparilla. If you guys have a liking for non-alcoholic brewed drinks, this one's good. I like it.
Sweet.
All right, we'll be sipping on that for the rest of this episode. All right. Some of you I know don't care and are probably fast forwarding through the podcast right now. But there was a stretch there where I had root beer like every episode. I've tried to cut back on my sugar intake, but boy, this one's making it difficult today. It's a good thing I don't have like a 6-pack of these things. All right. So, all right, let's get into the Shooter Ready Challenge. Matthew, tell us a little bit about, from your perspective. Obviously, I filmed and made the video for the Shooter Ready Challenge this month, as I typically do. From your perspective, tell me, what you saw and what your initial thoughts are on the Shooter Ready Challenge El Presidente.
Yeah, so I know we have some people that are competitive shooters and some people that listen that are strictly, self-defense shooters, and then those that like a little bit of everything. And some people will be like, well, I don't like running specific drills because it's not a scenario, right? Like this isn't a scenario that I'm going to get into, so why practice it? And we know, and I just like to throw this out as a caveat with any of these when we're talking about drills, is that they're working on specific skills, right? Like individual micro skills or a combination of different skills. It's not necessarily that we're working on a scenario. So let me just caveat any of these drills that we're talking about. But I like the El Presidente drill because it doesn't require a ton of ammunition, right? When ammunition prices are extremely high, and it works on a multitude of different skills, right? Like it works on because you're going to be doing a magazine change, so you'll work on that. You'll work on turning and picking up the target and then addressing the target, right? So a lot of times we start already looking at the target, right? So this is works on picking up the target quickly, and then presenting the firearm to it. So you work on your presentation, you work on a little bit of footwork, getting your base. You work on target transitions, right? And so and follow-up shots. So sort of like I don't want to say a cadence, but like a shooting to see how quickly you can see your sights and see the target, and how quickly you can do that and put effective shots and then transition. So it throws a whole bunch of different things into a small, short duration drill, and I think it's really a beneficial drill to work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the El Presidente drill. Real quick before I get too much further along here too, I'm actually going to give a little bit of the background or history of the El Presidente drill because I think it's kind of interesting and unique. Not every drill has a backstory like El Presidente does. But real quick, I wanted to address a couple of things. There was a question about if the P320 or if the SIRT pistols are part of our Black Friday sale. And that reminded me, I am sorely remiss by failing to mention our Black Friday sale, which is open to all, but Guardian Nation members get even more of a discount. So yes, our Black Friday sale kicks off for Guardian Nation members tonight at midnight and rolls all the way through tomorrow. Well, it continues through the weekend, but for Guardian Nation members, they get basically a day early or access to the Black Friday sale. And then Friday morning at midnight, if you will, is when the sale goes live for everybody. And the discounts are not quite as awesome for non-Guardian Nation members, but there's a lot of really great deals to be had. So our Black Friday sale can be found at concealedcarry.com/Black Friday if you want to see our sales flyer that has been put out. And I will say that the SIRT pistols are not a part of the sale this year, although they have been in years past. And part of the reason for that is, as Keith notes, he asks if the 320 SIRT is in stock. He's been waiting for over 2 months for his SIRT. And I am really sorry for that, Keith. You should know that everybody in the industry that sells SIRTs is dealing with the same thing, but there is a massive shortage of SIRT pistols. And Next Level Training, we've been working with closely, communicating with them. And I know that they are working hard to get caught up on SIRT pistols. So please continue to be patient with them. And yes, you can continue to order them. And yes, they are back ordered, but I promise you the wait is worth it. So it would not make much sense to put the SIRT pistols in the sale this year, where we're already dealing with quite a bit of a shortage / back order for the SIRTs. But yes, Keith, I hope that yours will come through very soon. It's hard for me to know exactly where we're at on that, but there you go. There's an update on that. All right, back to the El Presidente. So the El Presidente was basically conceived by the great Jeff Cooper that everybody knows and loves, and basically the idea was he served as a Marine back in the Pacific in World War II, right? After the war, and I'm quoting some of this from an article on handgunsmag.com written by James Tarr, a great guy. So nice little history here. He says, after the war, Jeff Cooper did a little work for the OSS/CIA in the same area. About 50 years ago, he was hired to train bodyguards of the president of a Latin American country. he developed a shooting drill he named El Presidente to not just help train those bodyguards, but measure their skill level. Here's the El Presidente. It's 3 targets set in a line with 3 yards between the targets. The USPSA standard is 1 yard between targets, FYI. So when you shoot the drill, the actual classifier version of El Presidente and USPSA, you have the 3 targets. They're set at 10 yards, and that's true to Cooper's original drill. But then you put 3 feet between the shoulders, if you will, between 3 USPSA targets. All right, you start 10 yards away, facing away from the targets, hands above shoulders in a surrender position. At the start signal, the shooter turns towards the targets, draws your gun from concealment, or not concealment, but that's the classic way of running it, and you shoot each target twice. You then perform a reload and then re-engage each target with 2 rounds. Some people like to run it with the with a slide lock reload, but the USPSA classifier version of this, and the way I typically practice and shoot it, is just with a speed reload, meaning you dump the magnets in the gun. You're typically leaving a round in the chamber, and you're just simply inserting a fresh magazine. So that is a little bit of the history, right? Going back to Jeff Cooper, his experience training these other country's bodyguards for their president, and he thought this would be a great drill and a great test of skill. And it really is, because it's no joke shooting 3 targets at 10 yards at speed, because the goal here obviously is to, go fast, or at least to get it done as quickly as you can. It's no joke. This isn't a 7-yard drill. This isn't a 5-yard drill. This is a 10-yard drill. So it's enough of a distance that it requires you to aim. In other words, you're not going to get lucky and get all hits on these targets if you aren't at least making some effort to aim your gun. You have multiple transitions, right? Target 1, transition to target 2, transition to target 3, and then you reload and you do it all again. And even to some extent, your reload itself is almost another form of a transition, right? Because your gun's coming off target, and then you're having to go back on target. You're testing the reload. You're testing this whole idea of turning and drawing, right? So there's a lot going on, and that's one of the reasons why I think it is an awesome, well-rounded, classic drill, because you have a turn, a draw, 3 targets with transitions, a reload, and doing that all again at an intermediate distance that requires a relatively decent, level of skill to execute all that and get good hits at speed. That's the El Presidente. Mm-hmm. You shot it, Matthew?
Yeah. As you were explaining that, I was thinking about a couple things that, well, I won't jump ahead. I'll let you kind of build it out as far as, the principles or the different fundamentals that we're working on. But there's a couple things that I like to do that you probably do the same things, as far as to try to make it more, less scripted and more kind of, decision making. So, but yeah, you hit all the big things about El Presidente. I didn't know. I knew Jeff Cooper made it, but or designed it, but I didn't know all the back history. So thanks for sharing that. That's cool.
Yeah. So it's a drill that's been around a long time, mm-hmm. and many people have been tested on it. It's one of the most. It's a drill that has probably some of the largest database, if you will, the largest amount of data about it. Because so many shooters have shot it, and they've shot it in a controlled environment, meaning USPSA competitive shooting, because it's a actual classifier, meaning that when USPSA clubs set this up, it has to be set up exactly correctly, dimensionally accurate. Everybody shoots it the exact same way, and all those hits and scores and times are recorded for all history and sent off to the USPSA and recorded there at headquarters. And then, of course, you're given a classifier score, if you will, or you're basically given a percentage that, because this one's been around for so long and is so well documented that, there is I think it's a very accurate, it's a very high standard. Okay. But when you shoot this and you're told you did this at a 70%, level of a grandmaster of your high hit factor on this particular drill, like that's pretty spicy, just so you know. A solid B class run is pretty spicy in this drill. An A class or a master class run is really, really, really good. Okay. Basically what I have noticed, Matthew, and I've shot this and tested myself on this a few times, is I can get it done pretty well in about 5.5, like pretty consistently in about 5.5 seconds. Sometimes a bit quicker, but where it kind of separates me from where the separation is between awesome and okay is with my hits. Mm-hmm. And that is, I mean, you've got 3 targets, 2 hits on each one at 10 yards. It doesn't take a lot of deviation to throw stuff outside the A zones and even sometimes out of the C zones. So what we want to do is give folks a couple of tips about how to succeed at the El Presidente drill. And this is kind of what I walk through in the Shoot Ready Challenge. The first thing I'm going to mention, Matthew, is the actual turn and draw. And I see Elke here, who's viewing the podcast. He's mentioning a specific technique for doing that turn and draw. I try to avoid getting too much into the technique of the act as far as like what exactly I'm doing with my feet as I'm doing this. Because while there are some better ways of doing it, in theory, the most important thing, in all honesty, is getting your head around as early as possible and finding your first target and letting your eyes get settled and focused on that first target. That's more important than any of your footwork. Is that one thing, is getting your head around, eye on target. That dictates everything else that follows. Now, what we don't want to end up with is with an unstable or unbalanced position as far as our feet. Okay. So I'll go so far as to say that we want to make sure our feet and our balance and everything is well balanced. Because that if we're not balanced, if our footwork is weird or funky or out of whack, then that's going to not help us get, we're going to struggle a little bit with getting good hits and having good recoil management and so forth as we go through these 12 shots and a reload. So, but the first and foremost priority is getting your head turned around. So as I'm standing there getting ready to go, my hands are in my surrender position. I'm waiting for the beep of the shot timer. Like basically what I'm priming myself to do as soon as I hear that beep, the bit of the beep is whip my head around. Okay. And if I do that and I find the target quickly and early, then everything else just seems to follow, meaning my feet come around, my gun is going to go to that point, so everything is dictated by that first target acquisition. And what I see in some shooters is they are too lackadaisical. They're too relaxed in getting their head around and getting their eye on the target. Now, I would say this, I know that it's not a common thing that we practice or that we even really see as far as in the real life, like a tactical scenario where we have a threat directly behind us and we suddenly need to turn around and shoot that threat. But what this drill teaches us is the importance of us getting eyes on the target as soon as possible. And then that's where the gun is going to go to, right? Wherever we're coming from, whatever position we are in, eyes on target is the priority when we are not already looking at it, or in particular when our head or face is not directly facing the target. So get that head around early, get eye on target. Everything else will typically follow. Matthew, you watched the Shoot Ready Challenge video, yeah?
Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, any thoughts or comments about about what I just covered there a moment
Yeah,
ago?
I was just writing down a little note to come back. Yeah, eye on target is huge because, like you said, whether it's for the drill sake or for real life sake, right? Like we have to start typically like on the range, right? Or if you're running the drill and you know what you're running, the go sign is a beep or whatever it might be, and you know what you're going to do. Still, you want to get your head around and start picking up the targets, right? So you can quickly address them and orient the gun towards it and position your body towards it as best you can. But in real life, right, like application is you need to start making decisions on, does this thing need to be shot? How far is it? Are there two people? Because the go signal might be like, hey, what the heck is that? Or you might hear somebody screaming, right? And so you're turning around, not necessarily knowing that I'm going to shoot three people that are standing at the same distance or whatever. So whether or not it's you're putting it in a practical application or the drill itself, your head getting around so you can orient yourself and say, okay, what do I need to do? Really important. So yeah, I would have totally agree. Getting oriented and then allowing yourself to set up that good base in whatever sort of direction or orientation that you find is appropriate.
Yeah. Awesome. What would be another tip for someone to succeed at the El Presidente drill?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, first getting your eyes on that target and then bringing the gun to that target. It's sort of like when we talk about when we start talking about transitioning between targets, right? We always lead with the eyes instead of, bringing the sights over and then kind of looking over or swinging your eyes along with the sights and everything at one time. We tend to overshoot and then have to overcorrect back. So we're a little bit slower. So I would say, the first thing, once you orient yourself, getting your eyes oriented on what you're going to be shooting, right? Or identifying, hey, I need to shoot this, and then bringing your gun to bear on those, to that point, rather than trying to get the gun out and then start searching as to where you need to shoot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really good stuff there, because we do talk about this in transitions, and let's be clear. So it's not that, let's say my eyes and my arms, meaning the gun, is on target 1. It's not that I put my eyes on target 2 and then move my gun
Right.
or arms. It's just that simply that the eyes really needs to get to the next target a little before my hands and my gun get there. But when I'm shooting a target and I'm about to transition, my eyes and my hands leave this at the same time. So that's
Right.
an important distinction. So they leave target 1 at the same time, but it's only going to take about 4 or 5 hundredths of a second for my eye to go from target 1 to target 2. Like very, 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 very little amount of time, right? It's going to take a little more time than that. Generally, at least 2/10, maybe close to 3/10 of a second for the hand and gun to get there. But my eye needs to find that next target as soon as possible, and then it makes it really easy for the hands and the gun to come over. I think it was Ben Stager, world champion shooter, in pro. He also travels the country, teaches classes these days as well. I think it was him that talked about or described how we use, it's like the cursor of our mouse as we're navigating across the screen. And it's a very, we don't even think about doing it, right? We just look on our screen, that next button or that thing we're going to go to and push, and our hand just automatically follows it. So I try not to overthink my transitions. Like there was a time I think I was overthinking them, like, and really driving the transition. It's not that we want to be slow, right? How much we need to truly drive it, I don't know. But what I do know is if my eye gets the next target quickly, it's pretty easy and pretty natural for my hands to just simply follow and get there as well. And so that's kind of the way I think about transitions these days, is sort of like, well, my mouse cursor is over here on this part of my screen, and now my eye is going to go over to this part of the screen, and the mouse cursor is just going to go, right there. And sometimes we don't land exactly on the right spot with our mouse cursor, and we make a little bit of refinement, but it happens very quickly and very intuitively. And we do the same thing with our gun. Eye goes to the next target, gun follows. We make slight amount of refinement if necessary, and then we send our next shot. And it can happen very quickly. So that's a great one. Here's another tip for success, El Presidente. What we typically see, what I see, and something I struggle with myself, is each target is treated as an individual target with transitions in between, rather than, and to use words of my buddy Tim Herron, treating it as a target array. Okay, the distinction here is you have target 1, target 2, and target 3. And yes, they are all each individual targets, but they're also a target array. Okay, so what that means is there are 3 targets, but I'm going to shoot them from the same position. I don't have to move other than I'm making these little bit of these transitions. Treat them as an array and don't think of them as target 1, then transition, target 2, then transition, target 3. What do I mean by this? Instead, treat it as 6 shots, but in 3 different locations. Okay, so the tendency is to go target 1, double tap, sort of thing, right? Do not double tap these, because you will fail El Presidente if you try to double tap, because maybe 5 shooters in the whole world can double tap at 10 yards and get, land both hits reliably in the A zone. But the tendency is it sounds like that, right? So target 1, whack, whack, and then transition. Target 2, whack, whack, transition. Target 3, whack, whack. So whack, 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 whack. Instead, think of it as 6 shots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But between 2 targets, or between shots 2 and 3 and shots 4 and 5, you happen to move your gun. So it should sound like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But you're transitioning between targets 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. Or shots 2 and 3 and shots 4 and 5. It's not that I try to stay away these days from teaching cadence when we shoot, because I'm a big believer and proponent of the vision and the sights dictate the pace at which we shoot. But practicing a drill like this in this manner, even if it requires you to sort of set a cadence and try to stick to it, can be helpful in you learning how to treat those as 6 shots in our target array versus 3 individual targets with 2 shots each. Right? Why is this even relevant? Why is it important? What is the difference that it makes? The difference is when we treat it like that, it tends to speed up transitions. So instead of having target 1 with a 20 split and then a half second or a 60th or a 6/10 of a second transition to target 2 and then a 20 split, and say a 6/10 of a second transition to target 3 and a 20 split there, add that all up and it's, I don't know, 120, 40, 60, be like a 1.6 seconds or something to shoot those 3 targets like that, as opposed to, let's say I shot each target at a 1/4 second split and my transitions were very close to being almost as fast. Well, we get 1/4 second, 1/4 second, 1/4 second, which would be 3/4 of a second, and then add in 2 transitions. Let's say those are 1/3 of a second. We might shave 3 to 4/10 easily of a second off of that first target array before our reload. So, and for some of you, you're going to shave off way, like I'm giving you the examples from kind of what I see and about the pace that I shoot it at. So in the past, when I shot El Presidente as sort of a double tap, to shooting it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, my hits are not only, or my times are not only better, but my hits are better.
Yeah.
It just is. And it's a beautiful thing. So you end up saving time and you get better hits. Whoa, hit factor goes up in a big way, right? All right, so that's my next big tip with shooting multiple targets, particularly if they're anywhere near each other. Treat them as an array, not as individual targets with whatever shots each on them. Try to keep those transitions only as long as they need to be. Try to get them as close to your split times as you can, and that's going to like blow your previous performance out of the water.
Yeah, when you explained that, that was one thing. If you guys haven't seen, the Shooter Ready Challenge yet, make sure that was a really good illustration. I think that you broke it down like that, because it does seem sort of counterintuitive, right? Like it would seem like, man, when I'm on target, I just need to blast those 2 rounds and then get over as quickly as I can to the next one. But when you explain it that way, it really does show. And I mean, I've seen you run that Langdon speed drill like a champ, and that's another one where your splits and your transition times are almost the same as you go across, and so it's the same concept, but you explained it really well in the video. So and right here, so just wanted to double.
That's a great point, bringing up the close speed drill from Ernest Langdon, because that is something that we see sometimes with shooters when they're trying to do that, they're like whack, 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 as opposed to when I shoot it, it's and you even rock it pretty well these days, bro, too. It's more like whack, 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 whack. Those last 3 are a little bit slower because they're a tighter shot, headshot. But that's, it's 9 shots and they all sound kind of, pretty even. Mm-hmm. And if you shoot it like that, then your control is generally pretty good. Your hits are pretty good. Your transitions are spicy. And that's exactly what we want to see from a drill like that with transitions.
Right on.
Other input or tips for success with the El Presidente, Matthew?
I think just in general, I'm thinking of 2 more, but I'll throw one, and then you probably hit the other one. I think it's important to remind about like when you go to do your magazine change, right? Like, sure, the technicality or whatever you want to call it of getting your magazine, changing it out, inserting it and all that. But I think reestablishing the grip is another thing that once I see, a lot of times where you run a drill where you do a magazine change, whether it's planned or unplanned, and you're rocking it, and then you do the magazine change and your grip doesn't get back to where it was before. Mm-hmm. And so the remaining shots are just a little bit either looser or just, you don't hit it quite where where it needs to be. And so I think that's another one of those things where reestablishing the grip is after the magazine change is really important.
That is a great tip. And let me build on that just a little bit. So one of the things I see is besides the grip maybe not getting reestablished the way it should be, but I see these 2 things as being kind of connected. So what you just talked about, but what I would add to that is also where I sometimes see shooters do the reload, and it's almost like they have to settle back in behind the gun. We want to minimize that movement as much as possible. So if I'm up on target and I'm shooting, right, and then I come in for my reload, I'm going to try to do this towards the camera for those that are viewing. My gun is going to move. So from on target, it's going to move about like that. And the muzzle is going to stay about, it's basically, the muzzle is still between my eye and the target. Okay. So all we're doing is dropping the bottom of the gun a little bit and canting it at an angle that is conducive to the angle my hand is bringing the spare mag up at. And that's it. And then once that magazine's back in, I'm just rolling the hand back into the gun, building my grip just like I do off of the draw. And so I'm going from that kind of that 45-degree angle that the gun is sort of canted now at this point. And we're just simply rolling the hand back into the gun and going right back to the target. It's a very minimal amount of movement in the gun itself, the muzzle and its relationship, or really kind of the tip of the gun. Your front, if you think about it in this way, my front sight, my goal when I'm doing reloads is for my front sight to basically not move. Yes, the angle changes, but if I was just putting a point on the front sight and its relationship between my eye and the target, it's staying, that point is staying in basically the same position the whole time that reload's being performed. Maybe it comes back in a little bit too, right? Which is fine, because I'm not doing reloads out at full extension. It's coming in, but the position of it in relation to the target is essentially the same. Just a little cant, about a 45-degree cant on the gun to ease the inserting of the magazine in. So great idea there. And I think that'll help people too with rebuilding the grip, because I see folks doing reloads where they change too much, right? There's too much movement. There's a lot of efficiency loss when you're doing that. You're bringing in the gun too close. You're turning things weird angles that don't need to be done. And it's coming, particularly the biggest thing is when people are bringing the gun low in their workspace, because then you have to get all the way back up. And that's when we see a lot of wasted motion.
Yeah.
So, yep. Hopefully that made sense for those that are listening to the audio only. But if you have questions, never hesitate to, or don't fear to send us an email, podcast@concealedcarry.com. Happy to explain things again, or even shoot a quick video for you or something. Send that folks' way. My last thing would be getting the hand of the gun immediately. All right. So I talked about the importance of getting the head turned around and eyes locked on your first target as soon as possible. That is my first priority, but I don't want to forget that it's also really important for me to get my hand to the gun as soon as possible as well. Now, this is specific to this drill. Is it different in a real world environment where if I say if something was happening behind me and I go, what's that? And if I don't know what that is yet, I don't necessarily want hands going on guns and guns coming out of holsters before I know what it is that I'm about to, I kind of need to know that I need the gun before I actually get the gun out. Right.
Right.
So I recognize that in reality, we may need to turn the head around, locate whatever it is that we need to see, start, getting the body turned around and oriented that way. And then, meanwhile, very quickly, we're taking in visual data. We're going, oh, something's going down. Now the hand goes to the gun. That's all fine. That's all acceptable. But in the context of this one drill, and in the context of a simple turn and draw for the sake of practice, I'm getting my head whipped around, my eye on target, but almost immediately my hand is snapping to the gun. And I say snap because that's how I want you to think about it. It's not a lackadaisical, lazy, oh, I'm going to get my hand on my gun. And, oh, I'm going to wait till I'm totally turned around, totally facing the target before I start pulling this thing out of the holster. No, people will think that they're going to draw the gun too early and break the 180, if they're concerned about that in a competition or on a flat range where the 180 is the rule. The only way I see that being a problem is if your turn is so slow. Right. But if you snap that head around and get your eye on target, and then your body follows also aggressively, you will not clear your holster before you're already well within the 180. It's pretty much how it's going to work. At the same time, we don't want to be slouches getting the hand to the gun and start and trying to draw it out. Okay. So basically, as I see it, these things we've touched on today, Matthew, are probably the 3 or 4 biggest opportunities for someone that wants to do well at something like the El Presidente drill. And really what it is, the focus is all on those non-shooting activities that suck up the time. The shooting itself, it's 12 shots that you can run quarter-second splits and be plenty fast on El Presidente. 12 shots at quarter-second splits, that's a maximum of, 2.4 seconds? Okay? You have, if you wanted to set 5 seconds as your gold standard, wait, I think I did my math wrong on that. It's 3 seconds worth of shots. You still have 2 to 3 seconds of turn and draw and reload and still get that in a very spicy time. Okay. Quarter-second splits, very doable at 10 yards. If you have the most basic of fundamentals down as far as grip and sight tracking and being able to call your shots. So just keep that in mind. This is not a splits drill. This is where can I chop off the biggest chunks of time? My turn and draw, my reload, my transitions. That's like, if you work really hard on those three things, you're going to probably do very well at something like El Presidente. And here's the thing. We talk about drills, about specific drills. Yes, they are flat range, square range, whatever drills, but these skills add up and translate into performance elsewhere. All right. So let's transition for just a few minutes, Matthew, and let's talk about let's start with the idea of drawing with movement involved. I would like to hear your take, your input on the idea of, it doesn't really matter what the start position is, but let's just say we're standing statically and we have a situation, we're going to get our gun out, but we're going to do that with movement. So walk us through how you approach that.
Yeah, I think from I don't want to say tactical mindset, but from a real world type of application, right? Like, I don't think, of course we want to draw and move, or we want to move, period. Whether we can draw or not, right? We want to move. Let's say somebody is not a deadly threat to us, so we're not drawing, but they are attacking us, right? Whether it's physically with punches or whatever, we're not going to draw our gun and shoot them, but we're probably going to move. So same mindset is, we have to move with some sort of purpose, whether we're closing distance to kind of go so we can address whatever threat is with our hands, or get in tighter, or we're moving to create distance, or we're moving on the other side of a object to put some sort of barrier. Whatever it is, we're moving with some sort of purpose, right? So like, I think that this drill is good because, again, first you need to orient yourself. You need to orient your head, your eyes, and take in all the stimulus and say, okay, what's going on? Does this person need to be shot? And so, if so, what's my backdrop? Where am I going to be moving to? Can I move to the left? Can I even, am I going to move to the left? Am I going to move to the right? Can I get my gun out in time? It might be one of those situations where somebody turns around and yes, they're a deadly threat, but drawing my gun, I'm not going to be able to outdraw this person. They may already have a gun, or they're 2 feet away, and I might have a sub-second draw. Great. But it's probably not going to be quick enough if this person's closing distance and they're only 2 feet away from me. Right. So I think that's the initial thing is get your orientation right. Figure out what's going on, get your hand close to the gun. If that's what you sense, if you hear shots or something like that, obviously we're probably going to sense that our gun is going to be needed. Doesn't mean we're actually going to draw it. But I think those types of things, so we start doing those things automatically before we even have to start worrying about drawing or squeezing or target, right? Like, get our orientation. What do we need to do? And then start coming up with, okay, I'm moving and now I'm drawing my gun and shooting, or I'm drawing my gun and getting to cover, or what is appropriate for the situation. But, but the drill itself, whether or not you're running it, a straight, time drill where it's all scripted out, or you're throwing a little bit of twists and stuff to make it more kind of tactical, is great, because that is the thing. Whether you're starting looking at the target or not, you have to orient yourself and figure out what you're going to do.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. All very good. And what I take away from what you just basically walked us through is everything is situationally dependent and context based. Because the context of whatever situation we're in dictates the decisions that we're going to make, the things that we're going to do, and how we're going to respond to, say, a threat. Whether movement is more of a priority, or if getting the gun out is more of a priority. I would say this much. So what I would add from my perspective is, if I have a need for my gun in a situation, uh, getting the gun out of the holster and put into the fight is that is the top priority.
Mm-hmm.
Movement is maybe also required and necessary, but if I move in such a way that I don't get the gun out within a certain time frame or whatever, then it might not make any. It might not matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I need my gun, I need my gun now. Then getting the gun out is a priority. The movement is a tool to buy space and time to put that into the fight, while making things, while also putting our foe, our adversary, kind of back on their heels a little bit, as far as they have to now start responding and reacting to us, because now we've initiated some movement as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the priority, if the gun is necessary to solving my shooting my tactical problem, then I've got to get it out of the holster. So why I say that, why I preface what I'm about to say with that, is sometimes what I see from certain shooters is, and we'll do these in classes I've taught, where we're doing some draws and moves and stuff, and they may start moving and they take more time than they need to start getting their hand to the gun and then getting the gun out. Okay. So it's like, well, great, you're running, but every step you're taking is just adding time to when you can start countering the threat with your own gunfire, right? So the movement is a tool, but it should not, in a lot of contexts, I think, override or become more, override the priority that is getting the gun out. Okay. So in other words, shooting USPSA, by the way, is great practice for this. It's great practice because there's a lot of stages where the start position is basically, where pretty much you are starting with movement and you're trying to get your gun out. Okay. At the very least, so even if you're not required to start moving and then draw on a stage, there's a lot of stages where that's advantageous, because your draw takes minimum, for most people, a second to a second and a half. We're talking USPSA style gear, open holster, a little bit of standoff from the body. It's relatively easy to grab and draw. A second to a second and a half is very doable for most, for even B and C class shooters in USPSA. That's actually quite a bit of time, especially on some stages. A second to a second and a half, right? So now some stages I have no choice but to stand there, draw as best and as fast as I can, and then start shooting the stage. But there's stages too where I look at and go, well, I know I have to at some point end up over here in this other position, but I also have to draw my gun. And while I could stand here and shoot these targets right in front of me, I know I got to come back to those anyway at some point, but I also got to get over to this other point. Well, I could move to that other position while I'm drawing my gun, and then my draw is almost like it's free, because it's being done during a period of time when I'd have to move anyway, right? It's just that that would catch up with me later on if I stood there and drew or whatever, and then had to move through the course of fire. That would all catch up to me and it would add up. So sometimes starting with movement and drawing is going to save you time. Now that's in a competitive perspective, but in a tactical environment, let's talk about like your classic tooler drill, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tooler principle. And the way people run this a lot of times, particularly in like force on force, is you put a threat running at you, okay? And you don't want to be standing still, right? The guys that lose in that force on force scenario, where with a rapidly closing in threat, are the ones that stay stationary.
Yeah, or they're trying to backpedal straight back, like trying to outpace, trying to make enough distance to give them enough time to draw. right?
Yep.
Like it
Yep.
doesn't work. You can't make up enough distance to give you enough time to
Yep.
draw on somebody who's closing distance on you.
Your adversary is running in a straight line. He's moving as fast as he physically can, right? And you're trying to backpedal. You will not outrun him. Now, it might buy you enough time to do something, but what buys you even more time is trying to flank your adversary, meaning you move laterally, right? And that forces them, now they can't, they have no option to run straight at you. They now have to cover more ground because they now have to follow, they now have to turn, they now have to pivot, right? And so that is what buys you a lot more time, is actually the lateral movement. Meanwhile, your priority is getting that gun out. So my point is, summing this all up, with movement and the draw, if it's going to be done as part of the same thing, I can initiate my movement simultaneously as I'm getting my hand to my gun. Here's my goal as a competitive shooter, because again, in competition shooting, my speed and efficiency is everything, particularly with stuff like movement, because if I have to move and if I have to draw my gun, that's not shooting. You can't score points per second if you're not shooting. So I want those things to be done as efficiently as possible. So my goal is to get my gun out of the holster when I'm starting with movement on the draw in less than 2 steps. In less than 2 steps. That's not a lot. It's not a lot of time. Okay, but basically I give you that with the hope that it kind of gives you that the perspective or the context that, oh, my gun can be out and I can be ready to put it into the fight in about 2 steps if I really need to. Okay, maybe even almost 1 step. All right. If I'm taking 3, 4, 5, and 6 steps, and I'm still just getting, my gun's just clearing the holster, or maybe I've taken 3 steps and my hand is barely getting to the gun. That's a problem, as I see it, in terms of efficiency. So I should have my gun clearing the holster by the time I've taken 2 steps, versus take 2 steps and you're just barely getting your hand on your gun. You can figure out pretty quickly who's going to, if you had 2 adversaries going at it in a context like that, who's going to win? The guy that got his gun out of the holster immediately versus the guy that thought, I'm going to move really fast, and then at some point I'm going to start thinking about getting my hand on my gun.
Yeah, I think sometimes I see people breaking this down on a flat range, and it almost gets into the like a rote drill of like slide step, get my stance or whatever, draw, and then fire. And it's like, I know you're trying to incorporate movement into your draw, but the draw has to start either simultaneously or maybe sometimes even before the movement, because it can't happen where you're moving. I'm not going to say every single time, right? Context is going to dictate, but when you see one of these drills where it's like, okay, we're going to draw and move, and it's slide, step off, get my, establish a stance, draw and shoot. It's building it up in I think an unnatural or a slower methodology.
Yep. Yeah, that pretty much nails it on the head. I mean, there's a comment here too. Elke says, Instructor Zero has a great YouTube on this showing lateral move wins every time. I've seen that video, and while I don't always agree with everything Instructor Zero does or puts out, that video I think does illustrate this very well. Anyway, some things to think about, guys. So yep. With El Presidente, transitions, reloads, turns and draws, movement and draws. Okay, there's a couple of things. We can't shoot unless we have eyes on targets, right? We can't shoot if we don't get our hand to the gun early and get it out of the holster and on target as soon as possible, right? We can be the best shooter in the world if we can't get our gun out of the holster reliably, consistently, and efficiently when it's needed. It won't do us any good. All right. Transitions, work on shortening those things up. All right. There's actually another great comment a little bit ago from Jared. There he is, where he said, starting and stopping is slower than a consistent pace. And this is really interesting because I think he was saying this as part of a follow-up to, at least I think, I could be wrong, to the transitions that we were talking about, treating targets as arrays versus individual targets, and instead of double tap, transition, double tap, transition, double tap. What's interesting here is that I could say the same thing about movement, that starting and stopping is slower than just continuing a certain pace, right? And that's actually that's absolutely true in the case of like footwork and foot movement, because when we stop and set up, it takes time, and then it takes time for us to kind of coil the muscles up and push off and go, right? If I can move through a position when I'm shooting an array of targets versus stopping there, shooting them, and then moving, it almost wins every time in terms of speed. Just depends on the difficulty of the shots that's being made. But again, applying this to transitions, really, I think that's absolutely what is happening when we have a consistent pace of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on 3 targets versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think it's kind of the same thing, and I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it in terms of starting and stopping with transitions. Yeah, I'm going to do some more thinking on that. I think that's it's sort of like a hard stop versus or a what's the term I'm looking for? There's a sort of there's the idea of you coming into a position hard and plant and shoot versus coming into a position soft and you're shooting as you're coming into position. And that's kind of what we're talking about here with transitions in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Less movement or less time with the gun stationary, keeping things moving. Got to be careful with that because it's easy to pull off targets early and to try to shoot multiple targets by, simply passing the sights through the target and trying to time your shots. That doesn't usually work very well. But the idea of like a hard stop versus a soft stop, interesting way of looking at it in terms of transitions. Alrighty, it's time to wrap it up. We do have a giveaway winner to announce. Matthew, what are we giving away today?
Today we are giving away an ebook or e-copy of The Legal Boundaries by State, which I even referenced in one of our little chat questions here during the podcast. So
I saw that.
Yeah. An ebook, e-copy of it.
Yeah, it's an online copy of The Legal Boundaries by State book. A guide for American gun owners in all 50 states. It's a great guide for if you're traveling or anything like that. Of course, it's always available on our website, concealedcarry.com. You can pick up a online or a paper copy of the Legal Boundaries by State. All right. So who is our winner today? Drum roll.
Drum roll is our winner is Matt. Starts with an S for his last name. We will email you, Matt S. And if your name is Matt S., just double check your spam folders because sometimes people don't claim or don't respond to the email I send out. And I have a suspicion that it may go to a spam folder or something like that. But
cool.
Matt S.
Cool. Matt S., congrats on
Yes.
being this week's podcast giveaway winner.
Yep.
Guys, a reminder, you can sign up each week for the podcast giveaway by going to concealedcarry.com/podcast prize. Next week, I believe we're giving away a t-shirt.
That is correct, sir. We are giving away the, walk softly and carry a big stick, I believe, right?
One of my favorites. And I think the first t-shirt we released as a company, yes, or it speaks softly.
Speak softly. Did I say what?
Which is a quote from President Teddy Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt, kind of referencing his approach with foreign policy. And I think it's a wise approach, not only in foreign policy, but also defensively speaking in interpersonal, communications and interactions with people. Speak softly. Try not to ruffle feathers. Don't get into fights you don't need to get into. But if you have to, back it up with a big stick and be ready to put in, put your tools into use when they are called upon and when they're needed.
Yes, sir.
Don't look like a victim. All that kind of stuff. All rolls together. Speak softly. Carry a big stick. Great words of advice. Awesome little shirt with the saying on there and the American flag and an AR-15 on it.
Very cool shirt.
America. Anyway, guys, well, we appreciate you being with us in this episode today. We wish you all, again, a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you back here next week. Well, Matthew and I next week. Again, this afternoon at 4 p.m. Mountain Time. Jacob and I will be doing another episode, so we'll see you then, too. Until then, train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.